But hopefully, as long as you can hear me now, that's all that matters. We will not be using Grassworld or Botanic. I'm going to show you the assets that I'm using, so that you can download them. They're like free ones as well if people wanted to carry on. And also, I saw the question up above about whether this is going to be uploaded to YouTube, and it will be. So don't worry if things are like going too quickly now, or if you just want to like recap later, it will be uploaded. So this is the project that we'll be doing today. I might add a couple of things just to like, I don't know, I had an idea about like going on 90 degrees, like how would you do a wall at 90 degrees, which I think we can do with Vertex Groups, so might test that as well. But essentially just this kind of like ruined wall idea, and it's pretty procedural. Like this one, as you can see, it's just like one brick that gets repeated all over, and then there's a little bit with an array modifier here for the arch, but that's pretty easy to set up. So let's jump out of this one and hop into this one. I am recording, that's good. Okay, I'm trying to set up my workspace so that the chat doesn't obscure anything. So hopefully you guys can see the chat and the camera right as well. Can't remember which bit. Cool, good stuff. So to do this wall is it's really simple with geometry nodes. We just need to begin with to get a brick. Actually, before we jump into it, let's have a look at what's been going on with geometry nodes development recently, because there's a lot of stuff coming our way that's really cool. So I am on 2.93. Yeah, I basically don't use 2.92 when I'm generally working because it's so lacking in functions. You know, if I open it here, 2.92, like the math nodes it's got like 4 functions. So if you want to do anything, then it's going to really hold you back. But it's cool that they added it for 2.92, and it is obviously it's stable. But yeah, like attribute math here has just the basic for arithmetic, whereas the attribute math in here has everything that we're used to from shaders. So that's useful. Also, I saw, and this is one of the things I'll show you in a sec actually, on the vector math, this right hand side, any of these ones on the right hand side currently do not work. So if you want like vector absolute or vector floor or anything like this, you don't actually have it at the moment. Oh yeah, the object thing in the chat. I'm not actually sure because I didn't write the chat overlay. It's just like an OBS thing, so sorry. If somebody asks a question and then I will like try and read it out with their name so that people get credited properly. So in the dev log here, so this is the developer.blender.org. There's a few cool things. So as of today's build, the 13th of March, we have the attribute remove node, which is super useful, but it only currently takes a single attribute to remove, right? So if I was to, I don't think you can remove built-in ones, but if I was to do like an attribute fill, just to add one here. All right, so we have the A1 at the beginning of the spreadsheet. And then if I was to like remove A with this next one, you can see it gets removed from the timeline. Oh, don't worry, Arturo, it's literally still the introduction. We're not actually doing anything yet. So yeah, the attribute remove node is getting buffed because it's going to get, I can't say this with absolute certainty, but from the developer log, it looks like it's going to be getting the multiple input socket, which is great because if you make a tool which has like 10 or 20 attributes being used, which are just kind of throwaway attributes, you can now just plug all of those string nodes, or you will be able to just plug the string nodes into the remove. Super useful. Attribute map range, this one is also coming. Victor's been working on this one really hard, so there's that's the preview of that. I think there is going to be an added result socket, so it will like, if you want to write to a different attribute, you can do that. oh yeah, the remaining attributes of the vector math node. That's what we just said. The primitive mesh node. So this one's really cool. This one's going to be during this sprint, which I believe is by the 19th it should finish, so another week or so. But we should be getting a load of primitive nodes for generating things like circles and planes. So again, that's going to be amazing. Node switch. You know, there's this node for is viewport. And everyone's like, oh, what does this do? So this is going to be able to be used to basically switch stuff. So with the attribute switch, you can have your Boolean coming in, which just says whether or not something's in the viewport, or obviously you could just like switch this or use another thing like the attribute compare. So this is useful, especially if you have, well, I'm thinking of using it for like viewport versus render instance counts, because at the moment that is like a really big optimization issue that I have with geometry nodes versus particle systems, because in the viewport at the moment we just have to use all of the instances all the time. A few other things, attribute processor, this one's still in the works, but it's coming, so this one should help us do maths to attributes without having to use attribute math nodes. So actually having the noodle connections, that's going to be amazing. The spreadsheet is getting a bit more love. At the moment we just have like this super early version, which we can't really do much with. Got a few options, but like the columns are just ordered alphabetically. Oh, the maximum function works. Does it? I was having issues with, to be fair, I haven't tried for a few days, so the last time I tested was maybe like 3 or 4 days ago, and I don't think any of them were working at that point. Oh yeah, and there's also the new tree, moss, and leaves sample file. So this has been updated again today, I think. So if you're playing around with the demo files to learn how the new tools work, then definitely try out the new, try out the demo files. And also congratulations to RC12 and Proud Imagination and Sakura for getting their food geometry nodes models into the demo files. I think they're going to be in the 2.93 demos. So that's great news. Well done to them. Quite a lot of people jumping in now. Okay, I'm going to drop a few more links into the chat here. So these are things that I'm going to be using in today's model. So like a fern and a flower and this aerial rock texture from Texture Haven. Yeah, Sketchfab. These are, I believe they're free with attribution. Yeah, commercial use allowed. So if you're watching this on YouTube, they will be in the description. So we just copy these across. And this one as well. If you're downloading textures as well, I used to have this really bad habit of just downloading everything as 8K. And I've got so many, I've got like literally hundreds of 8K textures, and it's so much space on my hard drive. But you just don't need them. Most of the time you can get away with 1K. So it's like for this, I would recommend that you use 1K. Oh, and also I will be using the Basher node. So if you want to grab that, that is on Gumroad. This one. So this just means that we don't need to UV unwrap, and we're not going to be able to UV unwrap because this is procedurally generated geometry. So there's not any UVs for us to even work with. Yeah, 8K is only useful if your pupils are maxed out. Absolutely. I mean, if you're like doing super close-ups of a specific hero asset, then I can justify going to download an 8K texture. But for most of the time, if you're posting to social media, it's going to be compressed to like 1K, the whole render, and then each asset is like 20 pixels across. So there's just no point. Yeah, cool. Let's jump in. A beard. Yeah, it's because I was looking at Purse Beats and I was just jealous, just jealous of his beard. I felt like I needed to try and catch up. Cool. So to begin with, for this wall, what we need is a brick, and we're going to do this in the simplest way possible. Just going to grab a cube, scale it down. I'm trying to think of how big I actually want one of these bricks. I'm thinking maybe like 400 by 250, something like that. 0.4 by 0.25, may even go a bit smaller than that. What unit? Millimeters, of course. Brick. Yeah, so any size brick is fine here. It's just because we're going to be remeshing anyway, and we're going to be making some of these different sizes and displacing them. It's just sort of a vague approximation of a brick. And also important, Control A, rotation and scale. Ooh, I can turn on shortcut viewer. That's probably going to help. And I'll bring that up. So there we go. So make sure you apply transforms, because when you instance this, it's going to have its transforms reset otherwise. Great. And the next thing I want to do, so let me just rename this brick. And I always keep a collection called hidden. This is essentially a recycling bin, or just somewhere that you can drop stuff where it's like outside if you don't want to delete stuff. Or like there was actually a few 2.93 builds a couple of weeks ago where anytime I deleted anything it would crash. So for times like those, or if you just aren't sure if you want to delete something, or if you just want to hide it, have a collection called hidden and just keep it hidden all the time, and then you won't run into trouble. So my brick is in there, and now I'm going to create the thing that creates the wall. So grab a plane, scale it down to 0 on the Y, and then I'm going to press M and merge by distance. So now I just have 2 vertices here, and I'm going to add to this. Well, we're going to rename it wall, and then I'm going to create a new geometry nodes tree here. Shift A, point instance. We're not distributing points, we're just instancing our bricks directly on the vertices that we make. So nice and simple, just point instance, and I want to select my brick object. So now what I can do is I can manipulate these vertices to bring them in together like this. Just literally scaling them together in X. And then I'm going to extrude up, so E, Z. And then I'm just moving this up a little bit. So make sure that you do that in one move, because now what we can do is Shift R and have it repeat. So I'm just doing that a few times just to make the wall sort of around about 2 meters, so that when we put a doorway in, we'll delete some of these bricks as well, but when we put in a doorway, it's important that you have like enough headroom to have the space to do that in a sensible way. And in wireframe view, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select every other edge like this and drag it sideways. Something like that. So now the great thing is I can just extrude this, and I'll have like my zigzag of bricks, right? And I can extrude it the right amount, and then I can now just do Shift R again. So every time I press Shift R, we just get a whole new section of bricks. Now, I appreciate that this is sort of destructive, because technically we should be using like array modifiers, but it also means that we can like come in here and just like delete a brick, which is really useful because we can make the wall look a little bit like aged. And also in the future, we're going to be able to get stuff like the delete vertices nodes. So if you have like a noise texture, you can basically delete nodes procedurally based on like a cutoff or like a clipping threshold on your noise texture. So that's going to be like doubly as procedural. Could you try doing it with masking the alternative points using modulo? You would be able to if we had an index. Yeah, if we had like an index. That's weird thing, but I'm pretty sure we don't know. There's currently no index on the Pink Floyd intensifies. You are not just another brick in the wall, don't worry. You are a unique individual creative. Cool, so can you not use Vertex Groups yet? You can use Vertex Groups. Come can we set up a vertex group? But I don't think that we can, because we don't have like a density attribute on this point instance node, I don't think there's any way for us to cull points. I might be wrong about that. I don't think there's a way to do it yet, because I think when I was last trying to do this, I think it was Hans Goody said that we needed a, because I was suggesting that we have a mask node, like the mask modifier, which is in here, which people seem to very rarely use, but you can actually do some really cool stuff with it. But he was saying that we would get a point, like a vertex remove node, vertex delete, and that would basically just solve that problem. So a wall probably ought to be a little bit deeper. Single skin walls are just going to fall over. So let's just extrude, literally extrude it in the y-axis there. I'm going to give it a little bit of space, and we can throw in like some infill, just a bit like manually later. And then when we remesh it, it'll look a little bit more interesting. So what happens if we want to have a wall at 90 degrees? So if I was to just grab, actually I'll grab the whole thing. So A, Shift D. I'm still in edit mode, of course, because we're dealing with vertices. We're not actually moving geometry at this point, really. But if I rotate this in Z 90 degrees, you can see that all of the bricks have remained in their alignment. So what we need to do here is add a vertex group. So I'm just going to press Control G to assign to a new vertex group, and I'm going to put these ones on a new vertex group called side. Here we go. So now what I can do is I can, before my point instance, I can rotate the vertices by 90 degrees. And the way that we do this, just the same as with shaders, right? If you have a mask, like in this case our vertex group, you can use that as the mix factor between doing something and not doing something. So if I add an attribute mix and I add a vector to my rotation, right? So I'm putting my rotation as the in and the out attribute so that we're writing to it. If I have my factor set to 1 and I rotate in the z-axis by pi by 2, because we're going 90 degrees, then you can see that we've rotated everything based on this mix factor. So now we just need to change the mix factor from float to attribute. And now we can set this as side, which doesn't seem to have come through. So let's just make sure that these are assigned. There we go. So for some reason my Control G didn't actually assign those vertices, but there we go. So just in edit mode, you can select your vertex group, make sure you have a weight of 1 and click assign. And now you can see that the ones which we assigned that group to are running in this direction, and the ones that we didn't run in the 90 degrees. So that's a nice easy way for us to set up different vertex groups. This is going to be really annoying if it's only in object mode that it works though. Interesting. I wonder if that's something about vertex groups not being available in edit mode. So just while I'm editing, I'm going to mute the mix node just so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm just going to position a couple of walls. I'm doing this kind of haphazardly. You can do it more intentionally if you want to. And I'm going to grab this other one, the front wall as well, and just duplicate it along so that we have enough space for a doorway. Doors are generally around about 800 mil wide. So I would just give it like a meter, something like that. And now you can see that we have like a wall starting to come together. So what do we do now? Well, let's break it a little bit. If we come into edit mode, I'm just going to go into wireframe there, select everything with A, and then if I press F3 to bring up my search, and then random selection, you can see that we have a few options in here. So I can deselect random verts now. Again, this is a destructive thing. As soon as we've deleted it, they will be deleted properly. Does the beard make Erin extra sexy? Well, yes. Yes, it does. Thank you for noticing. Do you know what, actually, there have been some really kind comments on YouTube recently, so all of this flattery, I don't know what to do with it. Okay. So I've randomly deselected some of these nodes, some of these, not nodes, some of these vertices, and now I can just delete them. So we have a little bit more of a haphazard wall, and I want to kind of delete a few more things just to kind of bring it down a little bit. So I'm going to go back into edit mode, tab into edit mode, and in wireframe mode, I'm going to press C to bring up my brush in here. And I'm just going to start like adding some of these to my selection just to kind of bring the wall down a little bit. And I want to do it on some of these side ones as well. In fact, I might grab a whole section here. Something like this, I think, is going to be fine. And then X to delete. And there we go. So you will find that you have some floating bricks, which we can sort in a sec. That's very easy to fix. But just for the most part, what we're trying to do is just break the wall, make it look worn down. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to move these down a little bit so they're a little bit closer. Just so that we're not getting that space in between the bricks there. And then I'm going to throw in some additional bricks. So places like this where we have a floating one, let me just mute that. I can just come in and I want to be in sort of pseudo wireframe here. And I can literally just extrude a brick out, right? Just, it's that simple. If you want to add another brick, just extrude a vert down. And again, I'm going to bring one across. And there should probably be one over here just for continuity. And this is definitely not going to stand up. So let's add another one in here. And in here. Extruding vertices and faces using geonodes would be really nice. It will be nice, but what we need to have implemented for that is vertex selection modes, because, or like face selection and things like this. Because at the moment there's no way for us to actually say like, oh, I want this vert extruded over there. So it will be amazing, but it just needs a little bit more time to mature. It's like so hard to, oh, well, I don't know. I find it quite easy to be like, oh, if only. But then I have no idea how hard it is actually to develop this stuff. So I think I should probably, I don't know, I keep meaning to get into the development side. But then it's just like, I don't know, it's scary. Just the idea of like doing the development. And especially with Blender, they're super tight on their standards and the way they comment stuff. There's like a real way that you have to do it. Okay, so I'm going to leave mine something like this for now, just the main wall. And so we will be needing indices. Yeah, indices should come with the primitive nodes because there's really no way for us to process the primitives without having the indices. So it should be built in with that. This brick on its side here looks bad, so I'm just deleting that. And this one's clipping as well. Let's just delete that one. Cool. So if we want more bricks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add a new collection in here called extras. And I'm going to duplicate my brick into the extras folder. Where is it? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to literally put this brick around. So let's rotate it 90 and make it longer. So this is going to be like the one which goes deep into the, like the doorway here. And I'm just going to put it in a few positions. Literally just Shift D, Shift R something like that. I feel like doorways, I always get confused on this. So the doorways should actually have like the same height stones on each side, which means I need to have a different alternating row of the bricks on the outside here. So if I grab this, go into edit mode, go into wireframe. Oh my god. When I do these streams, I change my screen scaling to 150% so that you can see everything. But it makes my mouse really sensitive. So that's a bit something to get used to. Okay, so I was just doing that just so that I can bring these in together. I'm just going to make it a little bit narrower, somewhere around here, just so that we've got about 1 meter's gap. And then let's just grab GX, Z, GX, something like this. So that's made a few of those. And I want to also add some random bricks just like on the floor. I'm wondering if I should do like a quick little physics sim with like a rigid body. So if I just add a plane, make this a little bit bigger, add a couple of cubes. So there's one to be the wall and then just a few others so that we don't lose track of everything. And then we want to mark these as passive. There we go. Save the file, thank you. I need to like set an alarm on my phone that does that. Just constantly like save the file every 5 minutes. So yeah, the good thing about setting up rigid bodies from the object menu is that it will do it to every single one that you have selected. I also need to add passive to the floor, rigid body add passive. And then, yeah, I say like every stream, hey there is there to make sure I've saved. I'm just going to add a bunch of bricks. Just like this. Just so we've got something to drop. Only locations. If you change it on your pivot, so that's a period on the alphanumeric side of the keyboard, then I can change it to only locations, and then I can scale stuff without changing the size of the actual thing. Just remember to go back to your, just turn that off if you want to scale stuff again. And I'm pressing R twice quite a lot just to like get the trackball rotation. Right, so if I just grab one of my bricks, maybe restart. Actually, maybe I should restart because Windows was giving me like a thing. It was saying like, oh, your version of Windows 10 is about to reach end of life. I was like, really? Thought that was not supposed to happen. Okay, let me just add active to each of these bricks. Grab them like this, object, and then rigid body, add active, and then we can just drop them. There we go. They should probably spread out a little bit more. So I'm just going to move some of these around like this, give them a little bit of space to fall away. Nice. Looks like Paz. Let me just, I will sort out this rigid body thing and then I will try and sort out the mic in a sec. Okay, give me 2 minutes. I'm just going to shut the stream for a sec. But we're back. Oh, yeah, and then the update also broke Blender, so I had to reinstall Blender. And if you've ever unzipped Blender, you know how long that takes. Something that I noticed in the chat pop-up is that Super Secret Goblin Prince is the only name that works. And I tried getting another one of the chat overlay things, and it was like the same broken. But at least one person's name comes through, so that's good. a name length thing. Oh, maybe it is. Cool. So where did we leave this? I'm going to do the brick drop again because it's forgotten. So this was all set up. There we go. So just simulating those down, and then I'm going to select them. Are we supposed to be tagging anyone, by the way? Did anybody leave and was like, let me know? Oh, maybe it was just Arturo, actually. So, once you have the bricks dropped like so, you can just select them all, go up to Object, Rigid Body. Now, do we remove this or do we apply Transform? And then do we remove it? I do this so infrequently that, yeah, that seemed to work. So apply transforms and then remove rigid body. Great. So now we've got some nice dropped bricks. We can just position these around just to make it look like they've fallen out of the wall. So I'm just manually positioning, duplicating. And let's chuck some in here as well. Choose freedom to update whenever you want. Choose Linux. I endorse that message. I know some people really, really like Windows. I have never really got on with it because I sort of grew up using Linux. So cancelled for this. Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, someone was mentioning about whether or not you could use Vertex Normal to align the bricks. So I do just want to try that out, actually. I'm going to try on a new object. So I've got a plane. Scaling my 0m by distance. Let me just turn on my screencast keys as well. There we go. Right, so new geometry node tree, point instance. And I'm going to just grab a brick here. And we are, oh my god, what did I do? Extrude up a few times. And then grab some edges, grab in X. And then we can extrude in X as well. So now if I was to duplicate all of this, see, I think because it does have an actual face, right? These pieces of geometry do actually have a normal direction. We should be able to, just before the instance, use a point align rotation to vector, and the pivot is going to be Z because that's the vertical axis that we're rotating around. The direction that we want to point out is going to be the Y axis, and the vector that we're aligning to should be vertex normal. Yeah, cool. So that actually totally works. Which probably also means that we could extrude in like a bend. If I do like this, yeah, that totally works. So if you wanted to make like rounded shapes, you could even properly create the mesh that way. Or you could just make your bricks and then use like a simple deformed bend, which I feel like a lot of people actually forget that that works. So bend in the Z-axis, right? And you can do something like that. So if you wanted to make a tower, that would be one solution. or equally you could use, if I were to use like a circle over here. Yeah, I'm actually going to use a radial array for the top of the doorway. Just it's slightly easier to set up, I find. This something which needs to be implemented for the user experience side is if you have a pre-existing geometry nodes tree that you want to apply to something, you should just be able to select it from that drop down rather than adding a new geometry nodes tree, which creates a new data block, and then having to select a previous one, because that's just kind of annoying. But yeah, so you can do something like that if you want to have towers. And that actually works surprisingly well. This whole thing with doing more hard surface modeling with geometry nodes in this kind of pseudo procedural technique, I'm actually really digging it. I think it's really fun just to like kind of, because you're sort of curating that way rather than it being like specifically, okay, just add all of these nodes one by one and you'll end up with something. Right, so we've got our loose bricks around and we have our main wall object. So I'm just going to select and move up just because it's slightly below the z equals 0 plane. Now we want to add our archway. So for this I'm going to use an array, and for that I want another brick, and I'm going to Alt R to clear rotation, and then I'm going to Shift S, selection to cursor. I'm going to rotate it 90 and apply rotation. I'm going to add a modifier, add a displace modifier, and set my direction to Z, my mid-level to 0. So this is a way that you can set a kind of a parametric offset. So the strength then behaves as your offset, your translation there. And then what we can do is we can add an array with an object offset. I'm just going to add an empty like this, which I will parent to my object. So now if I move my brick, the empty comes with it. And I'm going to set my object offset to this empty and rotate like so. And I'm going to increase the number of bricks here. I know my door is around about 1 meter, so the strength here should be 0.5. And then I can just rotate this a little bit further, something like this, and we can go to 5. I will also add a mirror modifier, which bisects in the x-axis so that we are not overlapping any geometry on that middle one. And we don't need to flip it, we just keep it. So axis and bisect, merge clipping, so it's all like properly joined up geometry. And then I also want to make sure that we have the edit mode toggle on the displace modifier turned on. So now I can edit in edit mode and see what's actually going on. And then we can just scale the top and the bottom, something like this. And you see that you have that full archway. Can make that a little bit bigger. And then I will also just make these a little bit bigger. Cool. So that's an archway. We could either leave this completely procedural, or we could like edit a few faces, which I think is probably what I'm going to do. But let's just position it first. So drop it over the wall there. And then I also just want to slightly increase the displacement, just so that we're properly lining up on those edges. Cool. So because I want to edit this, what I'm going to do is apply all of these just using the There's like an add-on that lets you do the apply all for like all selected, which is useful. But now what I can do is I can select a few faces from the front of here, but I may even select all of the faces. And then I need to, oh wait, can you random transform in edit mode? Maybe not. So I just need to basically edge slide, so G twice, just to make some of these a little bit different, as if bits of the brick has fallen off. And this top one as well, I am going to, oh, did I ransom? Just going to make this center one a little bit bigger as well, just so it's kind of like a keystone. And scale down in X to get my bevels in the right place. So there we go, just kind of neatening stuff up like so. So at this point, you basically have the wall as we want it, but we want to be able to do some more procedural stuff on top. So this is really important. Every one of these additional bricks that you've added by hand, like the hand placed ones, they need to be in a collection, right? So we can actually now disable this collection. So make sure that when you do, all of the bricks that you want included also disappear. And then in our geometry nodes of this previous thing, like the main wall, what we can do is we can add an input collection info, change it to relative, and I can select my my extras from here. And now what I can do is I can join geometry. And there we go. So now all of this geometry is part of the same object, even though in my space you can see that they all have different colors because they're currently all instanced objects. However, if I go in here and I add a remesh modifier, they all get remeshed together. So that's kind of exactly what we want to be doing. Just be careful if you are manually sliding the voxel size, because if you like crank it down really quick, you will crash everything, which I may have just done. And there we go, back to where we were. So let's add the remesh and let's not slide it this time. 0.02. So it's a little bit jank, but probably okay for what we want. Could maybe even go a little bit higher, 0.03, just to make it kind of lumpy. And then I want to add a little bit of infill on these walls, just in the middle there. And to do this, we just add stuff to the extras folder. So let's not duplicate everything. Let's just grab one of these. I'm actually just going to turn off that remesh for a sec. And let's duplicate it into the wall. And I'm just going to grab a bunch of these, put them basically in the wall cavities, like so. And then select them all. And we're going to just do a randomized transform. Randomized transform, here we go. Oh, on this screen scaling, that is massive. So we want to have some X rotation, a little bit of Z rotation, and we're going to change the scale as well. These are all going to get remeshed. The point is just to create some visual noise. And we can delete those ones, not including the wall. Cool. Something that I actually have forgotten to do is to add the random rotation to the wall bricks. Randomized transform just unblocked my project. Randomized transform is incredible. It's so useful. Use it all the time. Okay, so the remeshing now includes these cavity wall bricks, and I want to make this look more blobby, right, rather than it all being a nice flush surface. And because it's supposed to be old, these bricks wouldn't really be the same size and shape and rotation. So we need to add a little bit of random scaling and rotation. If, by the way, if you're using geometry nodes for the first time and you have a different modifier selected, you won't be able to like look at your geometry nodes tree. You have to select the geometry nodes modifier for that to be an option. So once you've done that, let's add an attribute randomise node. We're going to first of all randomize the scale. So I'm going to do a vector attribute that we're using is scale. That's definitely too much. So we want to go from like 0.9 to 1.1, just so that we've got a little bit of variation in there. And then equally for the rotation, we don't want to overwrite the rotation this time because we're doing the rotated ones over here. So let me just see what that looks like. You see all of them will get broken up the same way. So we rotate between nothing and I guess we want to rotate in the z-axis and the y-axis. But we don't want to overwrite the rotation because of these. So instead of replace create, let's change this to add. So now we're just adding to the rotation. And we're going to rotate positive and negative. So you can see we're starting to get a little bit of definition now. On here, I might go a little bit further. And I'm also going to, do you know what, I'm just going to go from -0.2 to 0.2 in all axes. Maybe that's too much. Yeah, something like that. The point is just that we want to have edges so that when we do our shader can start pulling out edges and doing some more of the fun stuff. There we go. So let's add a ground plane. Shift S, cursor to world origin, selection to cursor. And I'm actually going to add a new geometry nodes tree just for the ground plane. We're going to add a mesh, subdivide, give it loads of subdivisions, and then we're going to do an attribute proximity, and we're going to build up the floor around the wall a little bit. So this is going to be reactive to where the wall is rather than us like sculpting it manually. So now we can do an input object info and grab our wall object. And we can create a new distance attribute. I'm just going to call it dist. And you can see that for every point in our list on the left hand side here, we have a value. Basically, it's distance from the nearest point. So now what we can do is we want a fall off control. So attribute math, set this to divide by a float. So distance into the top and the bottom. So this is the distance that our fall off occurs over. And then I need to invert this. And I want easing. So I'm also going to use an attribute color ramp. Distance in, distance out. We're going to flip the color ramp so that we're going from a value of 1 being really close to a value of 0 being far away. And I'm also going to change it from linear to easing because smooth stuff looks better. Then we can just add this to the Z position. So I'm going to do an attribute combine X, Y, Z. Z attribute is distance. And the output from this is going to be height. And then we can now mix this. I know I just rushed through that quite quickly, but that is just an attribute proximity, taking our new attribute and dividing it by our distance value, dividing it by the distance that we want the fall off to occur over, and then flipping it and easing it with a color ramp. When we get the map range, you would do it with that. Combine X with Z to make it into a Z facing vector. And now we can add this to the position. So position, add height, position. And it's gone really high. Maybe these values are massive. Yeah, they are huge. Well, there we go. Apply that and make it relative. There we go, that's better. So it was just really big because I had not applied the scale. So you can see what's going on here. We're literally just pushing up the vertices around the wall based on the distance from this divide and the amount from this mix factor. It's important that you set the object info to relative as well, because it needs to happen relative to where their local transforms are for both of them. But there we go. So this just means that you can have a nice little localized bit of rise as the floor comes to meet it, and you can always add a mesh subdivide smooth afterwards. And there we go. It's just a little touch, but it can help just add a little bit of realism to stuff. So let's do a real quick shader on here. And then we'll have finished. So I'm going to jump into the shader editor here. Also going to use Eevee for this. If anybody has any questions as well, feel free to throw them in the chat. Or if you have any work in progress, I know sometimes these are a little bit quick to like follow along with, but always cool to see what people make. So, because we have not used the points to volume to mesh nodes, we can still actually use materials. I know some, like when I've done this before, I tried doing the cavity walls with the volume nodes, and it just stops you from using materials. So that should be fixed at some point, but at the moment, as you can see, we can still put materials on here. So that's great. And we're going to set up a really simple one. So I mentioned before the basher node, which I'll just drop in the chat in case anybody needs it. And that will be linked in the description. So I'm just going to add my basher here. The way the basher works is it does box mapping. So everything is like projected from the X, Y, and Z axis and is distributed on a Voronoi. So now if I put an image texture on here, and the image texture I'm using is this one. If I find where I've saved it. Blender tutorials, here we go. So I can just drag in my diffuse. Won't even try my name. Yeah, my name is too short for the chat overlay. So we've got diffuse, ambient occlusion, normal, and roughness. Normal and roughness obviously need to be set to non-color. I feel like I've watched so many Andrew Price tutorials in my time as like a Blender person that I can't say non-color data without hearing it in that like Australian lilt. It's always like data, which obviously English people say data. So here we go. Once we've put the nodes through the basher, I can just join them up like so. I cannot wait until we get Node Wrangler for geometry nodes. It's going to be so good. I think it was made actually, Node Wrangler, by the same guy who does Texture Haven and like HDRI Haven. I thought I saw a thing where he was saying that he was too busy to update it at the moment. Oh, is it? So hopefully somebody hopefully finds some time to do that soon. Here we go. So diffuse multiplied by ambient occlusion. That gives you the slider for the amount. And then normal, obviously it needs to go through a normal map node. Anybody who's wondering about why I have so many subcategories on here, this is the effects nodes add-on by CG on Fire. A link to that is also in the description. So normal into the normal, roughness into the roughness, and color into the color. And then we can set up our basher node so that we get the scaling correct. Here we go. So at the moment, these textures, you don't really need to worry too much. Even if you have like a proper brick wall texture, you could literally just throw this on top, because the way that we're remeshing and creating apparently floating bricks, what is that? There we go. Yeah, the way that we're remeshing and creating all of these bricks, it's more like an indication of bricks. It's not really, it doesn't really matter, basically. Your texture doesn't really need to match so much. That pie menu, oh yeah, this is like one of my must-have add-ons. 3D viewport pie menus. I would recommend turning some of these off, like Control S is a pain in the arse. The A1 is a pain in the arse. And Shift Spacebar is also a pain in the arse. However, things like the delete for X and Control Tab, I didn't know that was a pie menu that was not default. But yeah, like the different 3D modes you have a pie menu for, and the delete you have a pie menu for. So that's super useful. Yeah, so this texture looks a bit weird at the moment because it's all at random angles. You can just turn off the angle on the basher node there. I feel like they should point horizontally, so I'm just going to add a vector rotate and rotate the whole thing by 90 degrees. Eevee takes so long to compile shaders. There we go. So you can just hide all of your seams with the basher as well. So something like this. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of fake moss. This is super easy to do. So it's basically just a Voronoi and a color ramp, and then you mask out a section with noise. So if we take a texture coordinate node, I might start working in cycles in a sec. There we go. Just so that we don't have the initialization time. So object coordinates. And then I'm going to grab a noise texture and make this a little bit bigger. Get rid of the detail. We don't need to calculate that. And then I'm going to throw on a converter map range. And we're going from like 0.5 to 0.45, something like this. So these are where our patches of moss are going to go. Might even go slightly slower. Sorry, slightly lower on that. Something like this. So that's masking our moss. And then to create the moss, I'm just going to create a texture Voronoi node object. Always use object instead of generated, especially with stuff like this where we have different scales. And then let's just make this really big so that you have a finer texture. So that's a scale of 100 right there. And then again, map range, do we need it? Not if we're using a color ramp actually. So converter, color ramp, and the center points, I'm going to make a sort of yellowy green color. This will be on YouTube, yeah, don't worry if things are going a bit brisk. Yeah, I'll do like there'll be an uncut version, uncut except from that 40-minute break we took. So here we go. It's like perfect moss in 0 time. Perfect as long as you don't look too close. So I'm just going to use a mix node here. So that I've got my original texture, my mix factor allows me to bring in a second color, which we can do like this. And now we have, it kind of looks like peas, but moss. There we go, 200. And I might just add a little bit of detail on my node there. Cool. So let's add a couple more things. We want to have edge detection so that we have where. This is nice and easy for us to set up. Add an input geometry. Select your normals, and we're going to do an input bevel as well, which we can now do with optics as well, so that's super useful. Vector math set to cross product against the original normals, like so. And then we can put a length node on here. Is this actually not working now I've said all that? That is if you need to force something to shade smooth. So you could use like or if you only wanted to make part of your model shade smooth. So you can use it as, I've used it as like a fill. So if you use the point to volume and then volume to mesh, shade smooth, like right click shade smooth doesn't work. But if you follow that volume to mesh with an attribute fill and fill shade smooth with a Boolean, which is on, then you can force everything to shade smooth. Yeah, and when we get more like mesh selection tools, you'll be able to select parts of your mesh and say this bit needs to be smooth, this bit needs to be flat shaded. Yeah. Am I doing something dumb here? I feel like this should be working, but the bevel node does not seem to be picking up. Oh, that's weird. It does seem to be working now that I'm in optics. It wasn't working in CUDA for some reason. I can't explain that. Yeah, it's like the opposite of how it should work. So there we go. Now we have bevels. Best way to make the bevels a little bit more powerful is with like power or map range. I'm just going to drop them on directly. Oops. Like so. And then have it basically mixed to a white color. Just on the corners. Let's use a map range just to pull in those values a little bit. Just so it's a little bit brighter. There we go. And instead of mix, I'm also going to set it to screen so that I can just reduce my second value a little bit and have it kind of just pick up a little bit of sort of sandy color on those edges. Let's go for a slightly less bright. So this should be, maybe just turn that up slightly. The bevel seems to have stopped working again. I can't explain that. This must be a daily build issue then, perhaps. So I will report bug for that later. But that is how you would add bevels, unless somebody knows what I'm doing wrong. I remember to save. And then ambient occlusion is another one which is good to add, just to like throw in a little bit of dusty color on interior faces. So AO node on here. Is this one going to work? I kind of feel like ambient occlusion is also not working. But yeah, if you want ambient occlusion in yours, then ambient occlusion math node set to power, and then you can just crank the power up and this will like limit where it is. where the areas are, and then you can just multiply that onto your shader. Multiply, and then just multiply in like this. Cool. So once you have your shader, which is kind of built in a nice procedural way for you to not need to worry about any unwrapping, not really need to worry about any asset placement, and just throw nodes on everything, we just want to add some foliage. So the last thing we want to do here is just add a point distribute node, which I'm going to throw down there. I literally just saw the shader get edge detection again. So bizarre. But there we go. So we've got a point distribute. I'm going to add another join geometry further down the line so that we can join our created points to this. But for now, we're just going to debug these points. Or are we? Let me just see how this works with a brick. Okay, so we are actually getting the bricks. Oh, do you know what? Actually, I need to do this after the remesh, don't I? Apologies. So I've got my original node tree that makes the wall, and then I've got the remesh, and then I want to add another geometry node tree, which is going to add the bushes. So let's just name these node trees as well. Bushes, there we go. So on this one, there we go. Now we can start adding points to things. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we don't have anything growing on an absolutely sheer surface just with a dot product. So that's really easy to do, quite a useful one to know how to do. And first of all, I need to actually get the assets that we downloaded from Sketchfab earlier. So the flower and the fern, I need to bring these into Blender and create collections and hopefully not need to decimate anything. So I believe we have an OBJ for the fern, which we do, which is enormous. So let's just scale this down. Somewhere around here, and apply the scale there. Make sure it's got its material, which it kind of does, but I don't think it has transparency enabled on the material. So let's go and tweak that. This is the issue with downloading like OBJs, is sometimes the material hasn't actually been set up in a way which is particularly useful. So fern, make sure you bring in your opacity map, and let's just plug that into the alpha channel. Cool, so now we have a proper fern. And I'm just going to save this one as foliage, because we will want to, well, I will just copy them in actually. So we've got fern in here. Let's just import, I think the other one was like a GLTF, which is actually, I usually find has a better material setup. I find that GLTFs actually have materials with proper maps for everything, as long as they import. Oh, there we go. It's just huge. So let's bring this down a little bit smaller than my ferns. And let's also apply the scale to both of these, or to all of these. There we go. Man, there's a lot of stuff going on here with nodes and things. Let's just remove all of the parents but keep transforms. Delete the empties. Position these on the same place and then just join them. do it the lazy way. So Control J. And let's make sure that our origin is in a sensible position as well. So Shift right click to position your 3D cursor, right click, set origin to 3D cursor. And there we go, that works fine. These are super dense though. If you ever download a super dense model, decimate, just go straight at it. 100,000 polys. No, thank you. So we can take it down to 5, basically without any visual change. Decimate is super laggy, but we're going to apply it. So I'm literally just stripping off vertices, and then we're going to apply the decimate to make it a fixed thing. Yeah, we can go down to 2000, and that's fine. So Control A on that, and now we have much better topology. Well, much worse topology, but much clearer things. I kind of want to, if I select one of these verts and then Shift G, number of adjacent faces, then this basically selects all the ones which are not attached to a face, as you can see there. So then we can just delete vertices, and that's fine. Doesn't really matter that we've run out of stalks, because you're only going to see these from a long way away. So yeah, that was Shift G, by the way, to select similar. So grab both of these, Control C, copy objects, find your original file. Let's make a new collection for foliage and paste into there. Let's disable that, grab our wall object, point instance, collection, foliage. And then we can just play with the scale of these, scale and rotation. Yeah, magic flowers. We will also add the wool back in, but first of all, attribute randomise scale. So we're going to leave this as float actually, just so that we're not changing it all over the place. So from 1, I think they're a bit small in general at the moment, so going from 1 to 2 so that we have bigger ones. And then I'm also going to add one for rotation. Why does the overlay call us all object? I'm not sure. The overlay preview looks correct on the Discord website, because they have like a stream kit thing which has loads of stuff. But yeah, for some reason when we actually use it, it only likes people who have long names. So if you want to show up on the chat, just make sure that your name is like several words long. Rotation. So if you do one of these, replace create, for rotation, if you want to keep it working with the normals that were generated by the point distribute, rather than having to change the normal like point afterwards, so using a point align rotation to vector and then using the vertex normal or the just normal attributes, we can just change these attribute randomize nodes to add, and then basically just add or subtract from here. So I'm going to go from -0.2 to +0.2, but my Z rotation, to make sure that it like rotates all the way around. Oh, do you know what? That's not doing local space. That's annoying. So we will actually have to re-point these at the normal, which is fine. So yeah, I'm just going to go in my Z to 2 pi and then use a point align rotation to vector. We are aligning maybe the Z axis to the attribute normal. And now these all point out in different directions. And our randomize actually correctly works with the correct axes, or like the axes as intended. There we go. So now I can use a geometry, join geometry, to bring these back onto the wall. And the last thing we want to do here is just make sure that we don't have any on like super shear surfaces, right? On the flat surfaces. I want to have more on a flat surface, like on an upward facing surface. So this is nice and easy. Just after the point distribute node here, what we're going to do is use a point, an attribute vector math node set to dot product. And if we compare normal with the vector 0, 0, 1, then anywhere that the normal faces the same direction will have an output of 1, and anywhere that it points the opposite direction, it will have an output of 0, with a gradient in between. So let's write this to an attribute up, and then I'm going to use an attribute compare. This is like the logic one, so that we can do greater than. And we're going to do greater than a float, because the dot product outputs a float, not a vector. So we're going to compare up against this. So anywhere that it is greater than like 0.2 should be tilted upwards. So anything which is like on the face of these should disappear. And then I'm going to write this to up again. And now we can use a point separate node. This is like our mask. And our mask is going to be up. And then anywhere, so this is kind of confusing. You always think that geometry 1 is going to be the yes faces, but actually it's geometry 2. Because geometry 1 is anywhere that the mask is 0, and geometry 2 is anywhere that the mask is 1. So it's in that order. So now you can see that all of our ferns and flowers and things are on upward tilting surfaces, which is kind of useful. So like the mix with the factor, exactly, yeah. Yeah, you just got to remember that 0 comes, I mean, like obviously 0 comes before 1, but for a lot of these things, it kind of feels like the UI sort of feels reversed, but it's because it's in that order of 0 before 1. I'm just going to increase the density just so that we get a bunch on top of our walls. And let's also have this at like 0.15. There's a couple on some slightly upward tilted bricks, but for the most part, they're just on the properly up surfaces. I'm just going to change my visibility on here so that we have a shadow catcher on the floor. And no transparent film. Save. And rendered view. So there we go. It kind of worked. I'm sorry it took so long to reach this point. If you were, I know some people have been in the stream for like 2.5 hours. So honestly, thank you so much for persevering. But yeah, this is how you can make a fairly simple and still editable. You know, if I want a brick up here, I can literally just do that. And then now we have a brick. And it comes with a fern, and it comes with a shader with proper light edge detection. So super nice to start like generating woodland things. Really easy to do. Thanks. Can we get the blend file? Of course you can. Let me just pack external data. So, if you want to hang around now, Isaac is running the like the Social Saturday modeling club thing. There's a Isaac, if you're in the chat, drop what the theme is, and I will make a proper announcement thing. Theme is cute. Okay, if you want to make cute stuff, hang around. People are just going to be modeling stuff and hanging out in the hangout. Selfies are accepted. Nice. Yeah, or if you just want to make anything, like model anything, then that's also fine. I'm probably actually not going to model anything, but I am going to be here. I'm going to grab some food first. Yeah, just no stress. Nice chill time. So there we go. So if people want to move over to the hangout and just hang out, that's Go for it. Right. I'm signing off. I'll be back in like 10 minutes. I just need to get a drink. Bye. Thanks for watching.